You're listening to The Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to The Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and it is that time again. We're making predictions going into week number 5 of the NFL. A lot to look at. We got 14 games on tap as bye weeks have officially begun. We got a game in London this week as well, so that means you're looking at like a 9 a.m. on the East Coast, 6 a.m. on the West Coast sort of start time. So those of you on the West Coast, you're going to have to get up pretty early if you want to catch that matchup. But there is plenty to discuss, a lot to get into. Now, before I dive into predictions, I do have a pretty big life announcement I teased the other day. For those of you that maybe aren't interested, feel free to go ahead. I have the chapters put in there. You can skip to the first prediction for the game tonight and then just get right to it. But for those of you that are interested, as of last week, I signed an official offer letter with the place of work that I am employed at. For those of you that do know or do not know, I don't really talk about it on here, but if you follow me on socials, it is noted where I work, and I work for the New England Sports Network in Boston, and I recently signed an offer letter to become the producer and then in the next month-ish or two as an on-air host for their Foxborough Rush vodcast. For any of you who maybe are from the area that know what that's all about, I'll be working alongside them, focusing on the football podcast. I'll have my hand in some of the other stuff as well, but they are having me kick things off with the football stuff over there. So if you're from the New England area and you yourself watch Nesson, check me out. I'll be on there. Give it a month or two, and I'll probably get my face up on there. The first month or so is just going to be me kind of feeling things out, getting a grasp for how everything kind of operates over there. But I will be behind the scenes from the jump starting next week. So just wanted to share that with you all, because if it was not for all of you who come week in and week out to come watch me talk nonsense about football every single time I post something, I wouldn't have been able to secure a job like this, because it's from what I've been able to build here on this platform because of you all that I was able to be discovered by them and have them see what I'm doing over here. They were impressed by it and they wanted to get me on. So a thank you to you all who come in and week out. If you've been here since the beginning, if you've found me along the way, wherever it's been, whether it's through the NFL, the spring football stuff, I just want to say thank you all, because this is a massive life step for me in the direction I'm trying to take my professional career in. That all being said, though, we're diving in. We got Thursday night football action to kick things off. We are looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going into Atlanta. As always, comment down below. Let me hear your predictions, your thoughts on mine. Am I missing anything? All of that, fire away and discuss. But Tampa Bay, sitting at 3-1 right now, going on the road against their division rival, the Atlanta Falcons. I feel like the NFC South is an interesting division. These games are always competitive. They're always tight, and there's never really a true front runner, in my opinion. This division feels like one of those. It's going to go just about any way, and it really just boils down to who wins these divisional matchups that winds up taking the whole division here. For the first thing I want to look at, defensively, Atlanta. They've got to make Baker Mayfield uncomfortable. Atlanta currently ranks as the worst pressure rate this season. It's not been pretty. And you go and get a guy like Matthew Judon, you're really hoping with Grady Jarrett coming back that your pass rush was going to take a step forward. And honestly, it's taken a step backward to this point in the season here. And when you look at Baker Mayfield and how he's fared when he's not facing pressure, 73% completion rate. He has nearly 800 yards, 6 touchdowns, and only a couple of interceptions. Baker Mayfield has the 3rd fastest throw release time so far this season. So you have got to get to him and disrupt what he's doing there, because when he's not in rhythm, you take a look at what happened against Denver a few weeks ago. That is a prime example of what you can make this offense look like, but you've got to get to him. On the flip side of thing, for Tampa Bay defensively, they've got to be stiff up front, especially on that defensive line, but those linebackers as well against Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. Tampa Bay has allowed the 11th most rushing yards to this point in the season, and they're tied for 4th in yards per attempt allowed at 5 at this current moment here. And while ATL hasn't necessarily been a force running the football, there is a potential with the running back room that they have that they could maybe have a breakout game here trying to pound the rock on the ground, knowing there is a little bit of a weakness there in Tampa Bay. Offensively, it's all about Atlanta and establishing the run. I really feel like they need to do so. so to try to open things up in the play action. When you look at what Tampa Bay does on defense, they have been struggling against the play action right now. They're allowing a perfect 33 of 33 completions off of attempts on the play action against opposing quarterbacks here. So getting Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier going on the ground and forcing them to potentially bite into some of those things will really open things up for you offensively. So get under center with Kirk Cousins, get some running going, get it going early. And Tampa Bay, from what we've seen, they've been prone to biting on that play action. As for Tampa Bay offensively, and this is more just a want than like a expectation type of thing, I want to see them try and balance out this offense a bit more with Bucky Irving. Right now, Atlanta is tied for the 7th most rushing yards allowed per game here, and we've seen the flashes from Bucky Irving now, and this is obviously a very pass-heavy offense with the pass catchers you have. I get it, I understand it, but I want to see them balance things out. I know it's a top 10 passing attack. Believe me, I get it. But a balanced offense is what's going to take you from being a playoff team to a legitimate Super Bowl contender right now. And the passing attack has been really good when things are going well in Tampa Bay. But let's try to establish a more solidified ground game that teams have to respect. This is more of, again, a want than like an expectation for what Tampa Bay is going to do. But I really think over the long haul of the season, getting that ground game going a little bit more is only going to benefit what has already been a fairly impressive offense to this point. As for who I think is going to win, though, like I said, this game's going to be tight. It's going to probably be a little bit on the lower scoring affair, maybe more so in the middle than anything else, because I do think that there is some boom potential with these offenses here. But I do like Tampa Bay. I have them taking the victory, and I have them winning 24-23. So that should probably tell you where I am as far as my confidence level is in this. I feel like the NFC South is just a wonky division. I mean, you watch the way some of these games have played out within this division. You had just last week, the Falcons literally winning off of a career-long field goal from Younghoe Koo to get one over on the Saints. This is how the NFC South feels like it operates. It's always a tight division. There's no real definitive front runner, although Tampa Bay has been finding success as of late over the last few seasons winning the division, but it's always a very tight horse race for them. So give me a tight game, Buccaneers 24-23 to kick off the week. And for what it's worth, and I'm sure by saying this, I'm going to jinx myself, but I'm going to say it anyways, I am 4-0 picking games right now on Thursday night for the winner. Looking into Sunday's matchups, though, we start off, of course, with the early game, the London matchup, New York Jets taking on the Minnesota Vikings here. The Vikings, of course, 4-0 right now, the number 1 seed in the NFC, the only undefeated team left in the NFC. The Jets, offensively, the biggest question for me is if they're going to be able to throw this football against Minnesota. They have such an aggressive defensive unit from the front to the back, honestly. This is an overly aggressive defense, and it's been paying off through the first 4 weeks of the season here. Minnesota ranks in basically the top 5, and if not, they're in the top 10 in a boatload of the next-gen stat passing metrics. And when you look at the Giants overall, their passing efficiency currently ranks at number 15, so that's encompassing everything overall here. They have had some struggles, especially against some of those better defensive fronts, even last week, and I know it was a rainy game, but Denver is no slouch up front, especially when it comes to getting after the quarterback, and they clearly gave Aaron Rodgers some fits in that game here, weather aside. This is another one of those defensive units, so definitely something worth keeping an eye on. Minnesota offensively, they've been great. Their one weakness, however, is actually a strength of the New York Jets defense, and that's going to be their ability to throw the football when under pressure. Sam Darnold has had some issues in the past and has even shown them, maybe not quite as much because he's in a much better situation, but has shown that he does struggle when facing pressure. He's sitting on about a 48% completion rate right now, which ranks 21st in the NFL. He has 3 touchdowns and interception, but things are not as clean when he's getting pressure. He feels it coming. He's uncomfortable in the pocket. And for the New York Jets, they rank number 4 in creating that pressure here. So the caveat really is just making sure that you're bringing pressure after Sam Darnold, but it can't be via the blitz. Sam Darnold, for what it's worth, the struggles against the pressure he has faced has been a killer when teams send blitz. So it's got to be a 4-man rush creating that pressure from New York. Sam Darnold is literally ranked number 1. He's the best quarterback when facing the blitz so far this season. All they need to do is send that 4-man rush, do what they do best, create some havoc, and you might have yourself a chance at taking down the Vikings here. Defensively for Minnesota, I think they just got to keep doing what they're doing. I mean, the way that they attack, the way that they blitz and dial things up over there, Brian Flores feels like he's on a mission to just get after every single quarterback and make their life hell for 60 minutes, and they've been doing a really good job at doing that. Aaron Rodgers known for his quick get out when it comes to throwing the football. 74 of the 128 passing attempts he's had this season are considered quick passes, so 2.5 seconds or less getting the ball out here. Disrupting that rhythm is obviously key for taking down this New York Jets offense. When you look at the Jets offensively, I think the big thing for them, they've had some really bad struggles on offense this year, and it is a big part of why they're 2-2. And the way I see it, keep it simple. This is a really good team you're going up against in Minnesota, and if you want to get the job done, I do think it's one of those things where you don't want to overcomplicate it. Win on the key situations where you want to win. Think of third downs. Think of when you get into the red zone, turning those trips into touchdowns. Keep it consistent. Minnesota ranks inside the top 10 on defense as far as third down conversion rate, and as far as turning red zone trips into touchdown is concerned defensively. They are really good at keeping teams out of the end zone. They're really good at winning on third down. For the Jets right now, they've got to turn it up a bit, and they've got to be able to get the ball, again, in the end zone when they get those trips into the red zone, and on top of that, just simply winning on third down. Save your best plays for those crucial moments, and you have a shot. As for who I think is going to win, I'm expecting a lower scoring affair. I feel like at this point in time now, we have a pretty good idea as to like how these games in London play out. They're typically not barn burners, high scoring affairs. Expect to see a lower score total. I have the Vikings winning, and I have them winning a somewhat tighter contest. I think the Jets will find some success here, but ultimately that Vikings defense, and listen, I have been on the Vikings defense as long as I've been doing this podcast, and finally they have shut me up. And I respect what they're doing over there defensively. And I did not really have super high expectations for them coming into this season. They've shattered every expectation and then some that I did actually have for them. And the Vikings look good. I'll take them for the W, 23-18. I expect a good win, a solid win, but again, not a high-scoring affair because we don't really get that with those London games. Moving into the regular timed slate of games that we have here. We start things off with the Carolina Panthers heading into Chicago to take on the Bears here. For Andy Dalton, it's really about just getting the ball out quickly. And I'm talking, again, those throws that are under 2.5 seconds. That's how Next Gen Stats kind of differentiates between quick throws and longer throws. Andy Dalton has the second most passing yards this season when throwing the football under 2.5 seconds or at 2.5 seconds or less per Next Gen Stats. For Chicago, their defense does rank number 1 against short throws, which kind of goes hand in hand with quick throws. Typically, if you're throwing the ball out quick, the throw ends up being a short one as well. There is a difference between that. It's not the same thing. Again, one of those fancy Next Gen Stat numbers, but it's nice to take a look at those because it really kind of tells you what teams are good and not good at here in terms of defending and or doing on offense. They are also 4th in yards allowed versus the quick throws, so definitely something to keep an eye on for this matchup here. Andy Dalton's success has just been keeping them offense moving, getting the ball out quick, not letting the pressure get to him, so just keep an eye on that. That's probably what they're going to be looking to do here to keep that offensive efficiency up. For Chicago, their offense, they found some life last week, and it was through DeAndre Swift. 165 yards total in that game here with a touchdown on top of that. Carolina right now currently ranks 29th in rushing yards allowed, and they also lost linebacker Shaq Thompson, for the season with an Achilles injury. So keeping that in mind, get on your running back. DeAndre Swift, he's got the talent, and I don't think anyone's ever really doubted that, and I'm surprised he has not gotten more looks than he has, and I think at this point here, with the team in Chicago struggling to move the football through the air, and their best bet is keeping those throws short and quick, like I've kind of been harping on the last few weeks here, they're ranked 28th in overall passing efficiency as a whole. I think leaning into DeAndre Swift, trying to challenge that run defense and forcing Carolina to be able to stop you up front is definitely a good way for them to go. Defensively, not a lot has gone right for Carolina, and I don't really know if that's going to change, especially now you're losing a guy like Shaq Thompson, who's a bit of a leader in the middle of that defense there. Chicago, for what it's worth, though, has struggled offensively. As we just mentioned, for the most part, they have found a little bit of rhythm here and there these last couple of weeks, but overall, not necessarily the most threatening offense you're going to face week in and week out. I think they just straight up need to be aggressive. Go after the football, try to force a turnover. Chicago has been kind of prone to making mistakes so far this season, whether it's interceptions or fumbles. We've seen Chicago make mistakes. They're sitting on 6 offensive turnovers so far this season, closer to the top end of the league right now, so go after the football, be aggressive, create opportunities for your offense here because there is definitely a good chance you come up with a turnover at the very least, with Chicago averaging just a little bit over 1 turnover a game right now with those 6 that they have. For the defense on the other side of things, when you look at Chicago, aside from the passing game from Andy Dalton, Carolina has found some success on the ground the last couple of weeks here. Chicago's run defense has been solid, not quite to the level that they were last season with how good they are. They're currently ranking about 14 in terms of overall efficiency against the run here. But the way I see it, forcing Andy Dalton to beat your secondary by shutting down the run seems like a good route to go if you're Chicago. You have a really good secondary, a bunch of really talented guys back there. Jalen Johnson, obviously, and then, of course, Jaquan Brisker, just to name a couple of the other guys that are in there. It's a pretty stout unit, and for what it's worth, when Chicago stacks the box, they're actually pretty good at stopping the run. Again, they're pretty average, all things considered, but they do rank inside the top 10 when they start stacking the box and plug up a little bit more of those holes with an extra guy or two. So get after it. Force Andy Dalton, who at this stage in his career, I don't really know what he is to this point. Obviously, it seems like he's an upgrade over Bryce Young with what they're doing over there offensively, but force him to beat you with his arm, challenge him, see if he can actually get the job done against that secondary you have over there, and I wouldn't be too surprised if Chicago came away with a win. That being said, for who I think gets the job done, I will take the Bears on this one here. Another lower scoring contest. I expect defense, especially on Chicago's end, to really win out on this one here. Bears are still working on cleaning up some of the messiness of that offense, so I could see them keeping the point total that they have a little bit lower, but I like Chicago 23-16 for the win. The next game we're going to look at is going to be an AFC North clash. We're looking at the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Cincinnati Bengals, and in this one here, the first thing I need to look at is going to be Cincinnati's defense, because at this point now, with the last couple of weeks that they've had, there is definitely some conversation worth having about just how good this defense actually is. And they have been struggling against the run this season, and teams have identified that. They have the 5th most rushing attempts against them so far this season. They've allowed the 8th most rushing yards per game, and on top of that, they are the 5th worst in terms of run stuff rate and stopping those runs. You have Baltimore coming in right now. They are averaging, and this is this is like college, like Division I college. You're talking like Bama versus some no-name school at the bottom of the FBS. 6.4 yards per attempt. A wild number. And I was actually looking at the numbers right now. At this current moment, we have 7 different teams right now that are averaging 5 yards or more per attempt on the ground. And to just give you like a quick comparison into like from this year to last year, it's not 1-to-1 obviously because you have a season's worth of total here, but when the season wrapped up last year, you only had 2 teams above 5 yards per attempt. That's insane to jump from 2 to 7 right now. Running is working, and teams are really identifying that. And it seems like Baltimore is the team that is really going to expose the way some of these defenses are constructed because they're so oriented towards the pass right now. You have the nearly 200 rushing yards that they have going on. Not nearly 200. They are first in rushing yards by nearly 200 to this point in the season. Baltimore might just completely stampede Cincinnati on the ground. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. When you look at Baltimore and the way that they're constructed, their secondary right now definitely going to be put to the test against Joe Burrow. Baltimore comes in allowing the 4th most yards per game right now, and for what it's worth, all the struggles that Cincinnati has had, they have been able to throw the football to some extent here, and after a couple of strong back-to-back weeks now, they do rank 6th in passing yards. They have 7 touchdowns on the season, putting them closer to the top of the league than the bottom, but Baltimore is going to need their defense and that secondary to look the way they did against Buffalo last week, as opposed to how they looked the few weeks prior to that, because last week was that first really good performance that we've gotten from them against the pass, so they need to look more like that than the previous 3 weeks prior. Offensively, for Cincinnati to pass effectively, it really just, I think, is simply protecting Joe Burrow in this game. Definitely going to be key. Baltimore's pass rush has been good, that while they rank only 16 in pressure rate, they are sitting on 13 sacks on the season, tied for 8th most in the league. So they are a unit that can get after the quarterback, make him feel uncomfortable, and they will get to the quarterback and bring him down. So making sure that he is protected, he's comfortable in that pocket, he's able to deal to his, wide receivers, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, those guys. Since he's O-line, they've allowed the lowest pressure rate so far this season, only 8 sacks on top of that as well, putting them closer to the top than the bottom of the league at this point. So things are looking good, but simply put, protect your quarterback, and we'll see just how good this secondary actually is in Baltimore. As for the Ravens here, I fully expect them to ground and pound their way into victory here, and I don't really see any other way that this is going to shake itself out. Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry have racked up nearly 800 yards as a duo to this point here. Justice Hill has looked really good, and it's been mentioned now because at some point we're going to see him find himself into the rotation again. But Keaton Mitchell, who was torching defenses last year when he just blew up on the scene out of nowhere, especially when it comes to those outside runs, he's not even playing right now. So you have three very threatening guys that can run the football in Lamar, Henry, Justice Hill. Just wait till Keaton Mitchell's in there as well. Like the possibilities are endless. The rotations will be, healthy. They'll be able to share the snaps a little bit more. You're never going to have a situation where you don't have like a threatening force in the backfield between Lamar and whatever running back is going to be lining up against him. And I really feel like with the way the run defense is in Cincinnati right now, they rank 28th against those designed runs where quarterbacks are, scheming things up with their running back in some sort of read option, whatever it is, RPO type deal. I have a hard time believing that the Ravens aren't just going to, they're going to, if they have to run it 30 times in a game to get the win, I would be shocked if that's not what they're doing. And it's been made clear by Lamar himself. He loves running the football. He doesn't care about stats. If he has to run the football 19 times and Derrick Henry another 21 times to get the W, they'll get it done. They'll do what they have to do. And we're seeing that offense that maybe wasn't quite there that first week or two, really starting to sort itself out and figure out how they need to operate to be that dynamic duo that everyone was anticipating coming into the season. And the sky is the limit, especially with the way defenses are constructed right now. Baltimore, it feels like they're going to expose some defenses coming forward. As for who I think is going to win, I think we're going to have a fun contest here. I expect some points. I expect a large chunk of yardage between both these teams, and I am leaning Baltimore to get the W in the jungle here. The Ravens at this point are much better than their record shows at 2-2. You have to look at their losses, just an ugly collapse against the Raiders, and again, you're like a toenail away from potentially stealing that first game against the Chiefs. Best of luck to everybody, because it feels like this Ravens team's really starting to figure it out, and those tight losses, and yes, they may have almost let Dallas get back into things a couple of weeks ago, seem like they might be in the rearview mirror, and we're going to see what this Ravens offense looks like over the next month or so, or what it truly looks like over the next month or so. But give me the Ravens 31-27, big victory for them in the AFC North. Now we'll take a look at another divisional clash. This one probably going to be a bit of an ugly contest here, as the Miami Dolphins, led by Tyler Huntley, will be taking on the Patriots, who are standing firm on Jacoby Brissett being their quarterback. Tyler Huntley did not really inspire the way I think some people anticipated with him coming in here. Everyone talks about the Pro Bowl nod he got, but the circumstances behind that Pro Bowl nod are what they are. And it's very clear with just how, I would say, advanced this offense is. It seems like it's going to take a little bit of time for Tyler Huntley to really be able to operate this offense the way it needs to be. And Tua's going to be coming back, I'm assuming, sooner rather than later. So I don't even know if we're going to get to see that come to fruition here. And when you look at where Miami's sitting right now, they're last in points per game scored throughout the entirety of the season. Like, the offense even was, falling apart in that Bills game where Tua had 3 interceptions before going down with the injury. They've only scored 15 points in their last 2 games, only 184 yards of offense versus Tennessee. I genuinely have no idea how they come in and they attack New England's defense, because New England's defense, for what it's worth, maybe hasn't quite been at the level that people were hoping for coming into this season after last year's performance. Getting Christian Gonzalez back. They did trade Matt Judon away. Christian Barmore is out right now. You have other guys that are injured as well, like Juwan Bentley. There is a lot kind of working against that defense, so it's not quite where people were hoping, but I still think they're a well-coached, solid defense, and with an offense that is just such in flux right now, I have no idea what Miami's going to do. For New England, they just got to get back to pounding the rock, plain and simple. You look at their best games this season, weeks 1 and 2, 177.5 yards rushing per game between those two there. Miami has been about average or so against the run, allowing nearly 120 yards per game. They've also allowed 14 run plays of over 10 yards or more. With no David Andrews, I feel like now you're in a situation where passing the football gets even further complicated with the current state of the O-line. Just put the football in Ramondre Stevenson's hand. He needs to hang on to it, avoid those fumbles, but just pound the rock. That was a strength of your offense. Yes, teams will know it's coming, but you can still get them with play action and things like that. But this is a run-first offense going forward, the way I see it, especially with David Andrews going down now and potentially being done, or I think he is done for the season. I can't remember if that was solidified or not, but with Noah David Andrews in the lineup now, you are in kind of a messy situation on that O-line. And having quarterbacks drop back, whether it's Jacoby Brissett or even Drake May, in my opinion, I don't really think that's going to change what this offense looks like throwing the football. Defensively, Patriots just got to make Tyler Huntley uncomfortable. He looked uncomfortable last week, and when he was under pressure, 3 of 7, 22 yards, 2 sacks on 9 dropbacks versus Tennessee. I mean, it was not great. It was not great. New England's about average to slightly below at getting after the quarterback, but with the current situation in Miami, that could be a game where they look a little bit better than they actually are. Defensively for the Dolphins, losing Jaleb Phillips for the season, definitely going to hurt. But New England is still, like I mentioned, the worst pass-blocking O-line in the NFL with no David Andrews now. I don't really see how they can't, in some capacity, take advantage of that. So you got to force Jacoby Brissett to just get the ball out faster than he wants to, create some pressure. He's been averaging... I forgot to write it down. I guess I didn't write it in my notes. I thought I did, but I mean, he's averaging somewhere around, I think, like maybe 4 or so yards per completion. Like the number is not very high. He's not pushing the football down the field. You've got a chance if you can just make him uncomfortable. And again, no David Andrews now. The opportunity is there even without Jalen Phillips. As for who I think is going to win, this is a hard one to pick because, again, both these teams just in really bad places offensively, and you're counting on like average defenses to basically seal victories for you. I don't think there's going to be a lot of points. The game's in Foxborough, so I feel a little bit better about the Patriots. So, simply put, I'm just going to take the Pats because it's in Foxborough. I don't really know how you can break this game down and be confident in a pick. Both these teams are in not great situations right now, so I'll take the Patriots 17-15. Ugly contest. Probably not the one you're flipping the channel to during that 1 o'clock window, but it's a 1 o'clock game to the absolute. Looking at the next game here, we have ourselves Cleveland heading into Washington to take on a 3-1 Commanders team that is absolutely rolling right now, first place in the NFC East at this moment here. Big question is, of course, if Cleveland can slow down Jaden Daniels. Record completion percentage through the first 4 games of the season of any quarterback, not just rookie quarterbacks, but any quarterback breaking Tom Brady's 2007 record. Short throws, long throws, play action, against the blitz, not against the blitz. Jaden Daniels basically ranks top 5, like if not top 3 in every sort of like next gen stat passing category. He has been on an absolute tear through 4 weeks now. And now you have the conversation of rumblings of maybe they go after Devontae Adams. That would be an interesting situation for him to wind up in if that is the case, even if it sounds like he really wants to go play with Rodgers in New York. My biggest concern is basically Cleveland just struggling to contain Jaden Daniels right now. Cleveland ranks 27th against quarterback scrambles at this current moment here, and they are going to need to rely heavily on both Myles Garrett and just the rest of those guys on that defensive line to just make sure that they're not losing the edge, losing containment, and allowing Jaden Daniels to just completely torch them on the ground. I'm curious to see who ends up getting the responsibility of essentially spying Jaden Daniels, because at this point here, if you're running defense against Daniels and you don't have somebody keeping their eye on him at all times, you're defending the Commanders wrong at this point here. So I'm curious to see whose responsibility is Daniels, if it's something that gets passed around from, player to player depending on the situation, but very curious to see how they keep him in the pocket and how they're able to contain him, or at least try their best to rebound if they don't contain him and bring him down so he's not ripping you for 10, 15-yard gains. For Washington's defense, I'm in a weird place with them right now. I'm excited that they're 3-1. They looked really impressive last week against Arizona, but I don't really know whether this team is great defensively or not. You look at their games so far this season, you have 2 games where you're allowing 18 points or less, and then you have 2 games where you're allowing over 33 points. So you're basically 2-2 in terms of like great performances and not so great performances and keeping teams from putting points on the board. I don't really know what Washington is defensively at this current moment, but I'm hoping it's more akin to what we saw against Arizona than anything else, because a really good Washington team, I think, is kind of exciting for the league because it's just so unexpected. With Cleveland struggling overall, just offensively, this could be another good game for them. I wouldn't be shocked. There isn't really a lot going on, and I think if you keep it simply, win on third down. Cleveland is awful when it comes to converting. They're literally dead last on third down conversions. I think they're converting it's either 20% or 19%, something like that. It's a ridiculously low number, like 1 in 5 essentially third downs they're converting. This could be a really good game for you defensively, especially if your offense is rolling and you're starting to run away with things. You make them one-dimensional. You have to give up running the football. And then with the way that their pass protection has looked and how Deshaun Watson does not seem to have that feel for the pocket he used to anymore, this game could be good for you defensively if things go your way early. Offensively for Washington, for Cleveland rather, Washington's defense, like I said, not sure where they are right now. They have allowed 21 runs of 10 yards or more this season. I believe that is the most in the league right now. Running the ball versus Washington is potentially Cleveland's best bet here in keeping the score low and winning this football game, because Cleveland has not been putting up a ton of points, and especially not to the level that Washington has been able to this point in the season. Their most successful runs come going outside the tackles. When you look at the way Washington has been defending the run, though, they've struggled more so with runs on the inside than the outside, averaging about 25 yards more per game rather, when defending against the inside than the outside. So while Cleveland's bread and butter seems to be taking runs to the outside, it seems like there is a weakness on the interior of that defense in Washington. So we'll see what they opt to do there. But I think running the football and trying to manage the clock, manage time of possession, might be in the best interest of Cleveland with the way this offense has looked in Washington. For Washington, just don't change a thing. That's kind of where I stand. Like, with the way they've got things going on right now, again, Jaden Daniels setting a record for completion percentage for all quarterbacks in NFL history through the first 4 games. Keep doing what you're doing. Do not change a thing. Make defenses play against the way you're playing. Don't adjust your play because of the defense you're playing. I think you need to force those defenses to adapt. Washington can do no wrong at this point with the way their offense has looked. So until somebody finds an answer and actually stops you, just keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing it right. Shout out to Cliff Kingsbury, because his performance with what he's done with Jaden Daniels has been outstanding. As for who I think is going to win, I'm leaning Washington on this one. I think they're going to get the job done, especially with the game being in Washington, home game for them. Commanders 29-22 and a nice victory here. I'm expecting that Cleveland does find some success, and that's what's leaning to like a higher point total altogether. We're going over 50 points with this one here, but I think that the Commanders ultimately get the job done. Offense might wind up being a little too potent for Cleveland to keep up with. Next game, a lot of division matchups this week, but another division matchup. Indianapolis heading into Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. The Jaguars are wearing their like classic look from the mid to late 2000s look. Their throwback uniforms this week, and the last time they wore it was in December of 2008, and Indianapolis did get the win. Not saying that means anything, but just something to keep in mind. The uniform could be tainted. That being said, for the actual matchup, we have ourselves Jacksonville. Defensively, you're bottling up Jonathan Taylor right now. With the current situation surrounding the health of Anthony Richardson, and also just kind of the play and how things have gone with Anthony Richardson, throwing the football as a whole, Jonathan Taylor has been like the go-to guy that you can lean on in those tough situations to grind out those first downs, grind out those yards, get a touchdown for you when you get into the red zone type of deal. He has 72 carries for 350 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's averaging nearly 5 yards per attempt at 4.8. They love taking runs to the outside. Jacksonville, one of the better run defenses for all the struggles that they've had this season. They're ranking number 10 in terms of rushing yards per game. They're tied for 9th in run stuff rate. They've got to bottle up Jonathan Taylor if they want to win this game. For Indianapolis, D-line has to win in the trenches here. Jacksonville allowing 13 sacks so far this season puts him near the top of the NFL. And when you see the way things have gone for Trevor Lawrence when he's under pressure, he has completed only about 47% of his passes when under that pressure. So you gotta win up front. And they've been dealing with injuries all over the defense, even on the D-line. You've got to make Trevor Lawrence uncomfortable, because it's very clear that when he's not comfortable in that pocket, he's prone to overthrows. We've seen him miss some shots that he shouldn't be missing, especially with the amount of money he's making right now. Make Trevor Lawrence uncomfortable, and I think you should be okay. Offensively, I want to see Jacksonville, and I kind of talked about this in my power rankings earlier this week. They need to run the football more. It does not make sense to me why they're not running the football, and maybe it's because they're falling behind in games, and you have the game against Buffalo maybe skewing the way you're playing because you fell behind so fast. You're trying to get back into the game throwing the football, but they've got to run more. They have the 4th lowest rushing attempts this season, and they also have the 2nd highest yards per attempt of the season on the ground for rushes. And then on top of that, they have 16 runs that have gone over 10 yards or more. Indianapolis is allowing the 2nd most rushing yards per game right now. They're also 21st when it comes to stuff in the run. This is a game that if you were to ever decide to start running the football more consistently, take a little bit of that pressure off of Trevor Lawrence's shoulders, try to help him out a bit, this is the game to do it. You got Travis Etienne, you got Tank Bigsby, lean into your guys, get after it on the ground, see what you can do. For Indianapolis offensively, I don't really know what's kind of going on at the quarterback spot right now, obviously, with Anthony Richardson. Does he play? Does he not play? with the uncertainty around whether that happens, for me, just keep leaning into Jonathan Taylor. You're paying him all that money. He's extremely talented. And he's, in my opinion, and I know I'm a Colts fan, you could say I'm biased, but I don't really have a bias to Indianapolis. I promise you I don't. And I know that's like, oh, Colts fan, or, any fan of any team saying I'm not biased to my favorite team. I'm really not. Like, I pick against them more often than I pick for them, and I don't lean their way as much as you would think a fan would. I'm not even super high on the current situation with Anthony Richardson right now. Like, I like to think I'm somewhat realistic on this, but I do think that with the way things are looking right there, just lean into Jonathan Taylor. He's a top 3 back in my opinion. Lean on his strengths. He will help potentially carry you to a victory more so than, even though Joe Flacco is like the timeless, ageless man for some reason, and for whatever reason is giving these defenses fits, I still think leaning into your guy that is a top 3 back is probably the best way to go with uncertainty surrounding who starts on Sunday. As for who I think is going to win this game here, this is a really hard one because Jacksonville is in a really tough spot, and even though they're 0-4, I want to believe that they are better than their record is. And I mean, aside from the Bills game, they have a bunch of really tight losses. Like, it's 0-4, and if a few things go their way, they're 3-1. Like, that's the current situation of Jacksonville, and we'd be having like a completely different conversation about them right now. So it's hard for me to look at them and go, yeah, they're 0-4. This team should probably flop again, especially against a division rival. But as I said with the NFC South earlier, I don't know what it is about the South divisions, but the AFC South rings very much the same in terms of just how these games play out. They're always tight. They're always close. You never really know who's going to come away with the win in here. Ever since Peyton Manning left the AFC South, this division has been all over the place, and it's always very tight with these games. I like Indianapolis just a hair more because, again, Joe Flacco, for whatever reason, has looked really good. And Jonathan Taylor, I think, is probably going to be the best player on that football field for those 60 minutes next week, or this coming week, rather. So I'll take the Colts by a hair, 26-23, and go with that. I mean, both teams have a similar game played against Houston in tight contests, coming down to the wire, ultimately losing to Houston. You could argue maybe Jacksonville gave them a little bit more of a scare because it ultimately took a late game-winning drive kind of deal for the Texans to get the job done. But I think that the way Indianapolis is right now, coming off a big win against Pittsburgh, maybe they got a little bit more juice in the tank right now, and some things that are going on in Jacksonville are kind of scaring me, and it's making me hard to want to pick them at this moment. So give me the Colts, 26-23. Now we'll take a look at, and I love that we're getting a game like this so early in the season. These types of games, and it was clear the NFL had that directive of trying to load up the schedule to get you some more exciting matchups earlier in the season. We got Buffalo heading into Houston to take on the Texans here. This is another one where I'm having a really hard time of deciding who I want to go with. Intriguing matchup, absolutely intriguing. Buffalo has basically blown out all their opponents except for them getting blown out by Baltimore. Houston on the other end, bunch of tight wins, but also a blowout loss to Minnesota here. So both teams 3-1, but getting to 3-1 very differently, but their losses eerily similar. The big issue for me right now plaguing Houston, and it sounds like he will be back, Joe Mixon and the running back injuries they've been dealt with. This offense week 1 with Joe Mixon looked like they were going to be a top 3, top 5 at worst type of offense in the league, with Joe Mixon in the backfield and the way he tore it up in week number 1. 159 yards and a touchdown on the ground against Indianapolis. Since then, though, it has not been easy with both he and Dameon Pierce being out. They've been thin at the running spot, and I think defenses haven't really respected the potential of a run game from Houston, even with, I believe Cam Akers is there right now as their current running back. So for me, having Joe Mixon back in the fold is going to open things up. Just how effective he is coming off that injury will, remain to be seen. But with Buffalo right now allowing about 119 yards per game on the ground, minus the Baltimore game, if you take that out, solid unit, good test for them with Joe Mixon coming back. Nice welcome back for you, Joe Mixon. For the defense in Houston, big thing you're looking at here, running back James Cook, who has been cooking, as the kids are saying these days, until last week against Baltimore. He had 4 touchdowns, 285 yards, 6.1 yards per touch through the first 3 weeks. Obviously, in that game against Baltimore, basically shut him down, was not nearly as effective as he has been. For Buffalo to be the offense that they want to be this season, they need to get the most out of James Cook, because I think he is a key cog to this offense. And if he's not going, it puts them in a really tough spot. And for Houston, they've got to bottle him up. He is definitely one of those guys that at this point, with how much he has been involved in this offense and is a big part of why the offense has been so good, he's the guy you got to make sure you're taking care of. Like, yes, Khalil Shakir has been great. Dalton Kincaid as well. Keon Coleman has had some spots here. But I do think that James Cook is a big reason why Buffalo's offense looked awesome going through those first 3 weeks of the season. And no coincidence, in my opinion, that the offense kind of falls flat once there's an answer for James Cook and he's struggling to produce for them. Another matchup, just something I'm kind of looking at here, Buffalo's secondary versus Houston's wide receivers, specifically Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. These two have been, for all the conversation that went around about Stephon coming into Houston and maybe messing things up with just how willing CJ Stroud is to dish the ball out anywhere, all has been quiet and all has been productive as far as throwing the football. These two together combined for 55 receptions, 722 yards, 4 touchdowns combined. Buffalo ranks number 3 in overall pass defense efficiency, and in part to that, pretty solid pass rush, but now that Von Miller's gone, things could be a little bit complicated. So I'll be very curious to see how that secondary does handling 2 studs at wide receiver. You also have a few other guys in there as well that are pretty good. So definitely just like a matchup overall that I'll be interested in seeing here. And then, of course, you have like the battle of the 2 QBs. You got Josh Allen, who has over 800 yards, 7 touchdowns, no picks yet. Obviously taking care of the football much better than he has in years past, especially throwing wise. Then you got CJ Stroud, who's over 1,000 yards already. He's got 6 touchdowns, couple of interceptions. Quarterback duel that you could ask for, like one of the best you could ask for this early in the season here. We're getting treated. You got Joe Burrow versus Lamar Jackson in the AFC North. Then you got this divisional AFC clash between the Houston Texans and the AFC East. The Buffalo Bills is what I'm trying to say. You have a really, really fun matchup to look at here. Some injuries of note, though, just to keep an eye on here. For the Texans' offensive line, Laramie Tunsil and Juice Scruggs. Their health and whether they play in this game or not could dictate how this game shakes out, in my opinion. And the Bills linebacker Terrell Bernard, sounds like there's potential he could return as well. He would be huge for them over the middle on that defense. So just some key guys to keep an eye on. For who I think is going to win, tough matchup to really call because both of them are so good. But I believe in what Houston has building over there. I really, really do. DeMeco Ryans has taken that franchise and flipped it around. And I don't want to say that Buffalo got exposed last week because Houston literally went through a very similar situation going up against the Vikings not too long ago themselves. But I'm worried that if James Cook gets bottled up and it turns into one of those things where it's all Josh Allen, he's got to throw the cape on. We've seen how that goes, and sometimes it goes poorly, sometimes it goes well. It really depends on the day, but I feel like I can trust what they have going on in Houston right now, and getting Joe Mixon back, I know this offense can still be extremely productive whether he's there or not, but I think with him coming back into the fold, he's going to be juiced up, ready to go. It's in Houston as well. Leaning Texans a little bit on this one. So I'll take the Texans, but I think it's going to be a barn burner. We're going to get some fireworks, 35-31. Again, I'm not a betting guy. We don't talk betting here, but if you're somebody who likes the over, I feel like this could be a game for it. Next game we're going to look at, another divisional matchup. This time we have the Las Vegas heading into Denver to take on the Broncos. Las Vegas, a perfect 8-0 in the last 8 meetings between these two teams here. Interesting to say the least. When you look at these two teams defensively, for the Raiders, slowing down Denver's offense, pretty straightforward. It's not very complicated in my opinion. You make Bo Nix uncomfortable, you can disrupt their passing attack, then the offense kind of finds itself all over the place. Las Vegas has been about average at generating pressure right now. They're ranked 17th. They only have 8 sacks in the year, but there is the possibility that Max Crosby comes back. That'll obviously be great for them as a whole here. But when you look at Bo Nix, the way he is and just how he has played this season, he is a vastly different quarterback when he's under pressure and when he's not under pressure. You look at the game against Tampa Bay, they were not able to make him uncomfortable. They did not generate a ton of pressure, and Bo Nix had probably his best game of the season. So get after Bo Nix, make him uncomfortable, make him sweat a little bit. In Las Vegas, you should be able to disrupt what they're trying to do offensively. On the other side, though, looking at Denver, similar type of thing here, although Denver right now, they're one of those defenses that, because the offense has been struggling so much, maybe isn't getting as much of the love as they deserve right now. But Denver boasts one of the best defensive fronts in the NFL right now. Like, they're, in my opinion, top 3, top 5 at worst kind of defensive front right now. They have the second best run stuff rate in the NFL, 6th best pressure rate. They are tied for second in tackles for loss. They are second in total sacks. You have guys like Nick Bonito, Jonathan Cooper, Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers. They are a force up front, especially on that defensive line. They're going after whether it's Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, whatever happens there, because this team was like this close to swapping quarterbacks apparently, and now you don't have a threat in Davante Adams, excuse me. You don't have the threat of him to worry about now as well. You can really get aggressive with these guys. And you look at the Raiders and the way they've run the football, they're not super effective on the ground either. This is a game where they could be feasting. Offensively, for Denver, they've got to find a way, and again, basically reiterating the point about what the Raiders need to do defensively, the Broncos need to do offensively, but just the opposite. They need to protect Bo Nix. Like I had mentioned, he is a completely different quarterback when he's pressured versus when he's not pressured. Nearly a third of his dropbacks this season have been under duress, under pressure, and he's sweating it out, trying to figure out where he needs to go with the football. He's completing only 40% of his passes as compared to the 68% of his passes he's completing when he's not pressured, when he is dealing with pressure. So 3 interceptions versus 1 touchdown versus no pressure. So when you look at this offense, and the running game has not been super stout, for Denver's sake, you want to stay in it in a game like this, both teams 2-2 in some interesting spots, I guess you could say, at least, about both these teams right now and where they currently stand, all things considered. Take care of your quarterback. Keep him upright. You got to fend off Christian Wilkins, potentially Max Crosby coming back as well. Keep him comfortable. You should have a shot. For the offense of the Raiders, when you look at, again, losing Davante Adams, this is obviously going to take a threat for the defense and throw it out the window. One less guy that they have to worry about and respect his presence on the field. You found some success running the football last week against Cleveland, 152 yards rushing, first game over 100 yards rushing this season, and you nearly did your football field and a half full of rushing yards. So with Denver's defense being solid against the run, ranking 12th, establishing consistency on the ground, not only for this game, but just going forward through the rest of the season, is going to be even more important now, because now defenses I keep wanting to say Jonathan, my goodness, Davante Adams, with Davante Adams being gone, and it's all but signed, sealed, and delivered at this point. They just got to figure out where he's going to go and the compensation, it feels like. With Davante Adams not being on the field, teams are going to respect what you're doing against the pass a little bit less. They're going to key in on trying to stop the run even further, and you don't want to get into the trap of being one-dimensional. Lean into your running backs. Find some success with Zamir White and company. Get it going on the ground. You do not want to fall in the trap of being a one-dimensional offense. As for who I think is going to win, this is another one of those games where I'm anticipating a little bit of a lower scoring affair here. I don't think there's going to be a ton of points. I expect defense to kind of win out in this matchup, but I do have the Denver Broncos winning 19-16. Tight contest. I picked Detroit to snap that losing streak to Seattle last week. I'm going to do the same thing again with the Broncos here. Snap that losing streak against their division rival, Las Vegas Raiders. Once more, again, lots of divisional matchups this week. Arizona heading into San Francisco to take on the 49ers. This is a game where if you're not even diving in and looking at it from just like, a 1,000-yard view, you're probably expecting this is a runaway contest for San Francisco. I could totally understand where you're coming from, but the NFC West, another one of those weird wonky divisions where division matchups can always get a little bit crazy. You have Arizona coming off of a 42-14 loss at home. They're doing some traveling, heading over to San Francisco to take on their division rival there. Don't be surprised if Arizona does come out and plays extremely aggressive and maybe plays a little bit up to San Francisco here. But I do think that if you're favoring San Francisco, very fair by all means, in my opinion. You look at San Francisco's offense and the way they continue to just kind of hum along, even without Christian McCaffrey, and even when they were missing some other guys as well. But Jordan Mason has been huge for them, racking up over nearly 450 yards, 3 touchdowns, and is averaging 4 yards per attempt on the ground. Arizona allowing the 5th most rushing yards per game so far this season. If Jordan Mason doesn't go for another 100-plus yards on the ground, I would be kind of surprised at this point. You also look at There is the potential that San Francisco, having not really played a mobile quarterback, could be something that plays into the hands of Arizona. This is going to be their first real test against a mobile guy this season. You have Fred Warner, whose status is currently up in the air with his ankle injury, something worth keeping an eye on because you obviously want him over the middle of that defense as somebody who can keep an eye on Kyler Murray. Extremely athletic. In my opinion, best off-ball linebacker in the NFL, goes sideline to sideline better than just about anybody else in the NFL at his position here. You want to have a guy like him to be able to keep an eye on Kyler Murray and what he's trying to do on the ground. So whether he's in the defense or not going into this matchup, I think is going to be big. If he's not in there, again, that's a plus for Arizona and all the more reason why they might be able to make this game a little bit tighter than you'd anticipate. You look at what James Conner's also been doing on the ground. He continues to be productive, nearly 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, about 4.5 yards per attempt on the ground. You have Marvin Harrison Jr., who, poor week 1. Since then, has pretty much looked like that number 1 wide receiver that they drafted him to be. He's got 4 touchdowns on the year in basically 3 weeks. So aside from just like a few things to keep an eye on, the biggest thing I think you have to worry about for San Francisco coming into this is just the injuries that they're dealing with right now. They have 12 players with injury designations on their practice report right now. Their health could definitely be a concern here, especially against a division rival, maybe a little bit more of a motivated, bad taste in their mouth Arizona Cardinals. But I do like San Francisco for the win on this one. Just do not be surprised if Arizona, I don't know what the spread currently is at this moment. I did look at one point because I was just curious what Las Vegas was thinking, and it sounds like, I believe it was like 7 is what they have the San Francisco 49ers favored at. Whether that line moves or not, like moves at all or not, I don't know. I don't really care. It's just something that I'm interested in looking at to see what the thought process is there going into games. But I do like San Francisco. I have them winning 33-20, but if Arizona's offense can get going, maybe find some success, maybe you have a few guys playing that you maybe anticipated but don't end up playing on San Francisco's end defensively, keep the game a little bit closer, but I wouldn't be shocked to see a lot of points in this game. San Francisco, 33-20 though. Give them the W. We now take a look at, this is a really interesting one too. You got yourself a 2-2 Green Bay Packers heading into LA to take on the Rams. Packers, Jordan Love is back. Bit of I would say a down and up performance from Jordan Love coming into this game, or coming out of that game rather. Comes in, ugly start in the first half, strong finish the second half, finishes the day, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Again, down and up performance to say the least. That second half, much better look for Green Bay altogether. First thing I'll be interested in seeing is how these wide receivers fare in Green Bay, I should say, against Los Angeles' pass coverage altogether. When you look at the Rams defensively, 12th most in passing yards per game allowed, 8 touchdowns allowed in the season, tied for 3rd, funny enough, with Green Bay. Green Bay's offense, though, loves throwing the football when Jordan Love is there at the very least. 8 passing touchdowns on the season, 7th in passing yards per play right now. You got Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs. There's obviously injury concern with the ankle of Christian Watson, but this will be a really interesting contest here because the Rams have had some moments where they have struggled defending the pass. You also look at what the Rams are doing up front defensively. They definitely miss Aaron Donald when it comes to defending the run, but they have actually been extremely good at generating pressure without Aaron Donald this season, to the surprise of a lot of people, I would say. They're 1st in pressure rate, but they're 5th lowest in blitz rate. They don't have to bring extra guys. They just bring the typical number that they do. They get after the quarterback pretty efficiently. Love's first game back wasn't pretty. O-line did not necessarily do the best. Yeah, he was only sacked 1 time, but he was pressured 21 times. And again, he finished the day 3 picks, 4 touchdowns, obviously knocking up some rust. But when you look at Love versus the pressure this year, about a 36% completion rate with a touchdown and 2 interceptions with a 37.4 passer rating. So with the way LA's been looking right now, getting after quarterbacks and making them feel uncomfortable, keep an eye on how Love plays, because if he's not comfortable in that pocket, maybe you find him throwing a pick, maybe just making a mistake, bad throw here or there, bad read, something like that. Just keep an eye on. Green Bay continues to struggle defending the pass themselves. Obviously, we just talked about the Rams. You could definitely say a lot of the same similar stuff to the Packers here, although they're not getting the pressure rate that the Rams are getting right now. They're 9th in passing yards per game allowed, 8 touchdowns allowed as well, like I just mentioned previously. Despite no Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, though, Matthew Stafford is throwing the football pretty well, 7th in passing yards altogether, just under 1,000 at 978. You have 2 defenses that are just struggling overall to defend the pass, and I will be very curious to see what that winds up turning this game into, because you could have a situation where Matthew Stafford and Jordan Love getting the ball out quick, just dishing and dealing to their wide receivers against leaky pass defenses, that could run up the score for this game potentially. Then you also have Josh Jacobs, X factor out of the backfield. Now that Jordan Love is back, they were already finding a ton of success without him under center. But now that everyone's really kind of gotten a taste of what this offense can do on the ground, especially with Josh Jacobs, you have to respect Jordan Love and his ability to throw the football. LA has not been good defending the run. 165 yards per game allowed, third lowest run stuff rate. They let teams move when it comes to running the football. And while I said, yeah, passing defense, solid, but they do let people get by them at times. They've allowed 8 touchdowns. Don't be too shocked if Josh Jacobs just starts running wild. This Packers offense is clearly not afraid to run the football. And while you obviously don't want to be missing your star quarterback in Jordan Love, I would argue that those 2 weeks that he was gone were kind of good for this team because it puts you in a position where you could kind of step back and go, you know what? We might be able to run the football just a little bit more than we were planning to. Yes, we're paying Jordan Love a ton of money. He is the big name guy, the franchise quarterback, but it almost allowed Green Bay to discover just how good of a rushing attack they can be. And that benefits them, obviously knowing that, but also the fact that other defenses now have to be aware of that. So definitely something worth watching here as we move forward with Jordan Love back under center. As for who I think is going to win, though, the injuries issues is still something that has me really concerned, and just overall talent-wise on paper, I give the edge to Green Bay coming into this matchup here. I like them a little bit more in their current situation, so I'll take the Packers 28-24. Big win for them, get themselves back on track, and hopefully get Jordan Love a win this season. So give me the Packers 28-24. We now have the New York Giants heading into Seattle to take on the Seahawks, another NFC clash. We have the Seahawks coming in having scored no less than 23 points in a game this season. I bring that up because when you look at the Giants and the way that they've been offensively, the highest point total they put up was 28 versus Cleveland. That's the only time they've crossed the 20-point mark this season as well. So they have yet to even score even the lowest point total that the Seahawks have put up this season, and they've only crossed 20 once. Could be a bit of an issue for a team that had to settle for 5 field goals in a loss last Thursday night. The big issue for Seattle, though, currently, and something that the Giants could be taking advantage of, is the amount of injuries that they're dealing with, not only just in general, but especially on defense, with so many guys being knocked out of the games or just not being able to play last week. You have 19 different players with injury designations on the practice report right now. The Seahawks are a tough team to kind of predict at this moment here because you don't really know who's going to be on the football field for them, especially on that defensive side of things. And that, you look at the way the Giants have been playing, again, not super great offensively, but you have a stud in wide receiver Malik Neighbors, who is going to be someone that they have to deal with in Seattle. He has 35 catches to this point this season, 386 yards, 3 touchdowns. You have to keep an eye on what Malik Neighbors is doing, and you have to hope that your defense is as healthy as possible to try to mitigate his opportunities at making plays. Devin Witherspoon, or whether it's him, Tariq Woolen, whoever it is that winds up lining across from him, going to be a long day to see how they match up against Malik Neighbors and try to make him, a little bit less impactful against for this Giants offense here, because he has been an issue for defenses to deal with. You also have, on Seattle's end, running back Kenneth Walker returning versus Detroit. Looked really good. 4 catches for nearly 40 yards. He also had 12 carries for 80 yards and 3 touchdowns, averaging a wild 6.7 yards per attempt. That was a game that turned into a passing shootout, but if that game wasn't as high scoring, I'd be very curious to see what the totalage could have been for his yardage and just the amount of times he was going to run the football if that game didn't become a pass-happy affair. But the New York Giants have allowed 18 runs that have gone for 10 yards or more this season, 4th most in the league. There is a good chance that Seattle potentially runs away with this football game, and that's kind of what I'm leaning towards right now. I like the Seahawks in the matchup, even with all the injuries. I still think that Mike Macdonald has done a hell of a job, because you went into last week's matchup hurting bad, and it didn't get any better as you went through the game either. So now you're going up against a Giants team down and out, sour taste in your mouth after a really tough loss. You come in, I wouldn't be shocked to see Seattle smack around the Giants. So give me the Seahawks. I have them 30-17. Big victory for them. Get back in the win column and keep pushing towards that playoff run you're working on. Now looking at, and this is one of my favorite games of the weekend here, because this just feels like a classic throwback matchup. Sunday Night Football. Dallas heading into Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers here. Pittsburgh's biggest weakness defensively this year is simply just not getting enough pressure. That is their issue. When opposing QBs are averaging just 2.7 yards per play when Pittsburgh creates pressure, you find yourself in a situation where all you want to do is just get after the quarterback. I mean, you make them look awful. The problem is when they're not creating that pressure, that number ticks up by 5 whole yards, 7.7 yards per play when they don't get that pressure on him. You look at Dak, though, and the way he's played, oddly enough, when the pressure's on, he seems to do his best. Nearly 132 passer rating, 131.9 is the specific number. He has 5 touchdowns, about 300 yards. He has been sacked 9 times under pressure, but he has been nails when dealing with it. So keep an eye on how that works itself out. I'll be curious to see how that goes because, again, it's not too often you get a quarterback that's playing so well when they are dealing with pressure as compared to when they're not dealing with pressure. So definitely an interesting kind of thing to just look for in this matchup here. You also have a really fun potential contest between CeeDee Lamb and Joey Porter, star wide receiver coming up against an emerging star cornerback, and then Dallas. For them, I mean, simply put, you have got to figure out a way to contain Justin Fields. He has been on a steady progression each and every single week, looking better and better. And last week, a little bit of a hiccup in the first half, but really figured it out in the second half and looked really good. I mean, Justin Fields right now sitting on 975 yards and 6 touchdowns total on the year. You have no DeMarcus Lawrence now for the foreseeable future. Micah Parsons could even be missing this matchup as well. There is a lot kind of working against Dallas defensively at this current moment. Defensive line depth was already a concern coming into the season, and now you're potentially going to be down your 2-star defensive ends. Like, there's a lot that the Dallas Cowboys are dealing with defensively, and keeping an eye on Justin Fields and making sure that he's not torching you, whether it's through the air or on the ground, definitely going to have your hands full in Dallas. Offensively for Pittsburgh, keep feeding George Pickens. I am very big on George Pickens, and I think that he is one of those guys that he's great for circus catches. He makes some of those really difficult grabs look extremely easy. You saw what Malik Neighbors did to Dallas last week with the 12 catches, 115 yards. I think George Pickens is primed for that same potential of over 100 yards, racking up a handful of targets as well. He just has one of the best low probability catch rates in the NFL, and it really is crazy because since he's gotten here in 2022, this was an interesting stat poll that I was able to pull, but Pickens has recorded 49 receptions, which is tied for first, and 1,102 yards, second only to Justin Jefferson on passes with what is a sub 50% completion probability per Next Gen Stats. So when the going gets tough and the ball's in the air and it's in an awkward place and it's in a tight window and there's no godly reason why someone should be catching this, George Pickens is that guy making those catches, so keep an eye on him. I think he could have a really good game here. Then you look at, for Dallas offensively, simply put, they've got to get out of this one-dimensional offense that they're in right now. Yes, they can throw the football. Dak Prescott, again, and I say this a lot, but regardless of how you personally feel about him, he can throw the football with just about anybody in this league right now. Whether that translates into playoffs or not is a conversation for another day, but we're talking regular season football, and he does it just as well as anybody else. You look at what they're doing on the ground, though. Pittsburgh ranks as the number 1 run defense in the NFL. They are just so good in terms of efficiency. They just shut it down. They're allowing the second lowest yards per attempt at just 3.7 right now. Rico Dowdle and Zeke have combined for literally just 215 yards. So you're looking at about 54 yards per game right now on the ground rushing between your 2 starting running backs. We have yet to see Dalvin Cook appear at all as well. They've got to figure something out here because you're not going to skate by just throwing the football like 45, 50 times a game and keep winning football games at that. You're 2-2 for a reason, and a piece of that has to do with just an inability to run the football effectively and consistently. So they got to figure something out there. As for who I think is going to win, tough one to pick. It really, I think, comes down to, do you believe in Pittsburgh in that defense? Do you believe that Dallas can maybe figure it out offensively and against all odds with all the injuries they're dealing with, maybe come out with a win here in, what is it, Acrisure now? It's Heinz Field. I like Pittsburgh. I think if this game was flopped and it was in Dallas, maybe I'd feel better about going Dallas on that one, but with just where these two teams are at right now currently and the defense that we've been getting out of Pittsburgh this season and Justin Fields kind of exceeding like every possible expectation he could possibly be exceeding. Like, I remember people making fun of him week 1 for not throwing over the middle, and that feels like a conversation that happened years ago because after that week, not a peep. Everyone shut their mouths on it. So I'd like the Steelers, lower scoring affair potentially, as Steelers games feel to be, or seem to be rather. Give me the Steelers 20-19, big W on Sunday Night Football. And then to wrap up the week, going into Monday night, we're done with the doubleheaders this week. Thank God. I hate Monday night doubleheaders. I like to watch just one game. We got the Saints heading into Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. First thing I'm looking at here for the Kansas City offense, Kareem Hunt back in the fold. Good first game against the Chargers last week, 14 carries, 69 yards, about 4.9 yards per attempt. New Orleans ranks 7th in terms of rushing yards per game allowed defensively. I'm very curious to see if that was a one-off or if Kareem Hunt can bring that balance and stability that I really think this Kansas City offense needs to be at their very best here, especially all things considered with the injuries that they're currently dealing with right now. Kareem Hunt could wind up being a boon for this offense as we go through this next stretch of the season and with uncertainty surrounding Isaiah Pacheco's health. For Kansas City, keeping an eye on running backs here for them defensively, it's all about Alvin Kamara. It is like the Alvin Kamara show over there in New Orleans, and this team almost feels like it lives and dies off the success of Alvin Kamara. Can Kansas City slow him down? Can they bottle him up? Rushing-wise, 362 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's nearly at 200 yards receiving with another touchdown as well at 171. Casey's been allowing about 99 yards per game right now, so under 100 yards, one of the few teams doing so. They're ranked 9th in the league, so bottling up Kamara is going to be big because the big thing that was really going for New Orleans early was that ability to run the football so effectively. But now, when you look at kind of what's going on with the offensive line, you got a pretty big mismatch, in my opinion, right now on the interior here with New Orleans missing center Eric McCoy. Your center, Cesaro Ruiz, who is currently backing him up, is also listed as questionable. If he can't go, who do you have playing for you at center? Like, that's a situation you don't want to find yourselves in. But, like, you got D-tackle Chris Jones over the middle here, George Karlaftis and those guys, all really effective guys up front here. That is definitely something to watch here because Chris Jones has been a bit of a menace. He's able to get up in there, stop those runs. He's been credited for 8 this season. He's able to create pressure. He's got 3 sacks on the year. He's been really good so far for Kansas City, as he always is yearly. How does that matchup work itself out? And then for the Chiefs offensively, I'm looking at Xavier Worthy because now we're in a situation where Marquise Brown, obviously he's done for the season. That's been known for a while now. But Rashee Rice sounds like he avoided the ACL tear, but whether he misses however much time or not does not matter at this very moment here because it sounds like they're not going to get more concrete answers until next week anyways. They're waiting for the knee swelling to go down. You look at what Xavier Worthy has done. His time is now. He's up next. He's got to be wide receiver 1. The reason that they drafted him in the first round was to be that down the road, I'm assuming, be that Tyreek Hill for this offense. Well, unfortunately, unfortunately, we're going to find out sooner rather than later. He's going to get less time than maybe he thought to take over that role here. He has 4 targets with over 20 air yards coming his way with 2 receptions on those 4 targets and 2 touchdowns. He's got big playability. He only has 15 targets so far this season. I'm expecting that number to tick up here. Obviously, you'll probably get more from guys like Sky Moore maybe. Juju Smith-Schuster, I would assume as well. And then, of course, you have Travis Kelce over the middle at tight end, but I think the time is now. Xavier Worthy has shown that big play potential, exactly what everyone was anticipating he could potentially do just in small spurts. I really think at this point now, you're a month in, time to take the training wheels off, give him the reins. He's the number 1 guy. It seems like he's built some trust with Patrick Mahomes already. It's time for him to step up and be a big deal in this offense here and be that big number 1 that they need. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to it because I'm rooting for Xavier Worthy. I want to see him become that elite playmaker. He's just so fast, so electric. I want to see it. And I don't want to say I'm glad anyone's hurt, but I'm glad that he's getting the opportunity so soon because I'm excited to see what happens. As for who I think is going to win here, this is a fun matchup here, and I really think New Orleans is going to be competitive in this one here with Kansas City. Chiefs have by no means dominated this season. They've just been finding ways to win. Games are all tight contests coming down to the wire, but this one being in Kansas City makes me feel a little bit more comfortable about the Chiefs. If this was in New Orleans, I would honestly not be opposed to picking the New Orleans Saints for this win here, but in Kansas City, I like the Chiefs on this one. Tight contest again, 24-21, get them the W. Those are my picks and predictions, though, for this weekend slate of games. Let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts, your opinions, your predictions. Fire away. Love following along with you all here. But that is it for me. If you made it to the end, as always, I greatly appreciate it. I'll catch you all next time. Have a good one.